Well, hi, Sam. It's great to see you.
Good to see you, Janan.
It's been a long time. So
Yes.
we took the summer off.
Yeah.
We it's fall, but it's almost winter, so we almost took the whole fall off.
It's been busy.
But
It's been busy. It's a
yeah,
good
it
problem to
has.
have.
It has. It has been busy. I'm sure everybody listening can relate to busy this year in particular has been an interesting one for sure. So well, I'm glad we're back together and we've got another episode and more to come. And we thought this one, let's talk about something that you've recently written. So you did this LinkedIn post, all about kind of strategies for construction firms faced with workforce shortages, um, all these kinds of issues that make our lives really busy and complicated. Why don't you just kick us off, Sam, and tell us what this article is about, really, and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah. I think construction, the industry itself, is such a dynamic industry. There's a lot of um, these market forces, if you will, that are affecting how we're building today. And I think, construction in general has been sort of behind the curve when it comes to technology and how that can help them. And also just with how busy construction companies are on a regular basis, it's really hard to implement software for them as well. And what ends up happening a lot of time is you have these, companies that have huge tech stacks that, none of it talks to each other and they're underutilized. They're not utilizing it to its best ability a lot of the time because, if you've ever been on a job site, it's incredibly dynamic. There's, safety, there's production, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people on one job site, depending. So I can totally understand where they're coming from, why that's happening. So the inspiration behind the article was, let's talk about these market forces that are affecting the industry and, how can we help companies, one, look at a solution to help solve some of their issues around, hitting their production goals and also limiting their exposure to risk and
Right.
keeping their people safe. And then also, we wanted to touch on how to implement software in an effective way so that you get the quickest time to value and also, quicker successes right out the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, when we talk about all these forces out there, why don't we start with workforce shortages, right? So you mentioned 90% of contractors are struggling to find the skilled workers that they need. And how are companies using technology to address that?
Yeah. So, I mean, just from talking with a lot of companies, you kind of hear that there's tons of growth and they're hiring a lot of people, which is great. And then you also hear the opposite where, we've got an aging workforce that's, planning on retiring in the next few years. And we also have this huge amount of growth. We're building a lot, but we're not having enough seats to fill, if you will. And, how companies and the industry is pivoting is, we're trying to train a lot more people. And, granted, that does uh, result in, hiring maybe lesser skilled workers, which is not a bad thing. They gotta learn somehow. She is really going to help that effort as well. For one instance, one of our case studies on our website, they recovered, $250,000 worth of lost or misplaced tools, which, just the software alone can help free up labor trying to locate tools and phone calls, searching for resources. So, having that visibility into the who, what, where, when of where your assets are can help you focus on more critical tasks outside of just trying to find a tool somewhere on the job.
Right. Right.
when it comes to, some a software solution like ours.
Yeah, so like really just making sure the crew that you have optimizing their time on the work you them to do, not the work that they have to do because, as you say, in this one case, they can't find the tool they need. Yeah. And that's an impressive number too, $250,000. That's not something to balk at, certainly. So that's a really impressive number. And I'm sure we have lots of stories like that. To tell. So getting the workforce that you have focused on the work that they need to do, not on the in between things that take up a lot of time.
Yeah.
So another force again is compliance, right? So there's regulations, there's OSHA, right? There's site safety plans telling us what we need to do to stay in compliance with being safe on the job, right? And this is cannot understate the importance of that.
Yes.
So how are software safety solutions helping companies get in front of staying in compliance with regulations?
Yeah, well, and just to connect the dots from, labor shrinkage to that the industry is experiencing, having to hire a newer workforce that's less experienced, compliance is definitely uh, something that I would say is a threat to the industry. Software, of course, can help with that because it's not an Excel manual spreadsheet, pen and paper that's going to take tons of time and time behind the desk. A lot of my safety friends would agree with me. There's a lot of time behind the desk, and they'd rather be out there in the field working with the team.
Yeah.
So, you know, software solutions like what AlignOps offers is OSHA reporting and reducing time making reports and just giving that real time insight into one compliance, and then also you're able to slice and dice that information. You don't have to spend your weekends doing pivot tables, if you will, in Excel. The system can do it for you and give you those insights into those hidden leading and lagging indicators. So you can be proactive about, compliance, and then also, really teaching the team and um, how to work safer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do love a good pivot table, but but I do know being out in the field, there's nothing like that, right? Being able to be with your team, help them understand where the risks are going to be, and at the same time knowing you're capturing the data that you need to fulfill what you're going to have to report back to OSHA. And OSHA is becoming more and more, it's got to be electronically delivered. It can't be, you can't send me pieces of paper anymore, right? I don't want handwriting. I want the digital version of that incident report of, the inspections that you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really interesting. So we're at the job site. We've got people working, people staying safe. Um, but we've also need lots of materials on a job site, right? And we've got lots of supply chain disruption.
Mhm.
Um, and they're hard to forecast, right? It's hard to get in front of a supply chain disruption, but how do companies manage one outcome of supply chain, which is the cost? So lots of things getting more and more expensive. How does kind of software help with managing a rising cost of a material you're going to need?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit something right on the nail on the head, if you will. Um, you know, Materials and supply chain is kind of it's a volatile world right now. I would also compare it to like the insurance industry. Construction companies are, having to track the price changes pretty often with materials. Being able to proactively manage your stock, I think is really important, especially from what we've heard from our clients,
Mhm.
is being able to reduce the project delays, and having that real-time tracking of you know when is it time to reorder versus in a reactive way.
Mhm.
And then also having insights into, do you have too much of something? Something like our system, who you can put those min and max thresholds in place so the system can proactively notify you, hey, you're running low, it's time to reorder, or hey, you're way too high in this particular material.
Mhm.
So having that insight, I think, helps you make better decisions faster, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Well,
also tracking those costs associated with it as well.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, we often think about not having enough, but if you're storing a whole bunch of stuff you don't need,
Hmm.
right, you could be using that money and that space in a much better way. And we see that a lot in our customers, right? Where it's like, I didn't realize that I had all this stuff sitting here
Yeah.
until I was actually tracking all this stuff and I don't need it all. What am I going to do about it? And then how do I prevent this from happening in the future
Yeah.
where you're giving more people visibility into what you've got on your shelves so that, you know, person A over on job B isn't buying something that person C on job D just stocked, right? Like it's available across job sites. There's more of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's lots of ways. Again, you're pulling up that data, making it easy, accessible, and so you can get in front of some of that stuff.
Yeah. I would also venture to say, maybe you have materials left over that you want to account for that maybe you could use on another job, relating that to a lean construction principle, of minimizing waste and maximizing efficiency. That's also, I think, a piece of data that could really help optimize operations and, help say reduce some costs there on your materials.
Yeah, for sure. Well, can we go back to safety for a
Of
sec?
course.
I know you love to talk about safety, but
Yes.
um, we know it's a top priority, and I do feel like the world is evolving in terms of seeing it not just a thing I gotta do, but a thing that really is going to make my business grow and my workforce better, right? My outcomes just all the way around better if I've got safety first principles infused at the job site and I got everything I need to run a safety program, right? So, how do companies use technology to reduce incidents at the job site
Mhm.
and kind of thinking more about like we've got this reduced workforce, we've got assets, we don't know where they are, we've got supply chain issues, we may not have everything that we need. All these things can impact the safety of a job site too. So how are you seeing people use technology to reduce those?
Yeah. So, just from some of the case studies that we have, again, on our website, and just the anecdotal conversations that I have with our customers, is, inspections is I think, a really key point to a safety program. With a software program similar to ours, of course, like AlignOps offerings, is being able to, one, write a report, and then also, you know, notify somebody of potential hazards that you identified while you're doing those site audits.
Mhm.
And what happens a lot of the time is, it's tons of emails or phone calls or text messages, and we don't really know when hazards have been mitigated.
Mm.
So having a system like that can be a game changer into reducing potential incidents, because you can identify a specific person to fix this hazard. It's noted in the report, and then all of that communication is being tracked in a software program versus text and emails and, you know, word of mouth.
Yeah, I mean, so inspections that are performed at the job site that are get kind of are act as a proactive mitigation of an incident. It's
Yeah,
like I'm inspecting a piece of equipment that may need service, right? So don't use it until it's serviced because that could put the person using that piece of equipment at risk.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, another thing too, because just to touch on this with safety, a lot of the time safety and production are at odds with each other. And, a lot of safety people are seen as the safety cop, if you will. But um, the reality is it's almost negligent to not identify hazards. And I think, everybody's aware that construction is a dangerous job. I mean, I think construction deaths account for 20% of workplace injuries and deaths in the US. And uh, while having positives, which our system can do, being able to identify positives like, hey, you did a great job with this, and negatives. What I see a lot of companies do is, it's they're heavy positives because they want that positive recognition, which is definitely important. However, we're not identifying enough hazards, and everybody knows that it's a dangerous job. OSHA knows it, safety teams know it, and the idea behind it is we're trying to identify these hazards, get them mitigated, and being able to show that you're actually following up and fixing those corrective actions. Software can track that for you, like ours, is actually going to play a bigger benefit to you over the course of time. If a regulatory body like OSHA gets involved, or insurance companies, you know, evaluating your premiums at the end of the year, that this is actually going to help you.
It reminds me of a webinar I did recently with one of our customers about lean construction principles and data driven, right? Being data driven. It's like
Mhm.
don't make it about the person or the individual, make it about the data, right? So it's just
Absolutely.
yeah, so like remove this whole
Blame game.
yeah, I don't want them to see that we've got these hazards because then that's going to fall back on me. It's like, no, it's just these are hazards. This is how we're going to mitigate them. We got them. We mitigated the hazard. It's no longer a hazard. Next time we inspect, the inspection goes really well, and we don't have any more incidents related to that hazard, right? So it's like it, take the personal out of it, take the people out of it, the
Hmm.
cop out of it, and just show exactly what the data is telling, look at what the data is telling you to make better decisions and improve that. So, yeah. Well, so from the job site at the job site, you talk in your article a bit about public-private partnerships. So those are like really complex projects. So how are you seeing these companies manage these types of projects?
Yeah. So, it's something that we hear a lot, that, these P3s, you know, having that being or meeting these deadlines and compliance with P3s is important. For equipment tracking, for instance, across multiple job sites, we do have case study that maps that out on our website. But having that visibility, having that data, being able to produce reports are going to help you appease those P3 reporting standards and also improve efficiency as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So it's all kind of centered around all the same things, like really great data, readily accessible, really easy to report out on, so you're not scrambling to figure out how you're going to tell the story. Um,
Mhm.
well, this is really interesting. Again, we're going to link to the article in our little summary when we post the podcast so that people can read it if they haven't already. But before we wrap up, um, do you have advice for construction companies that you want to share on getting software like this implemented, getting technology to be part of the way they do things?
Yes, yeah. So, much like their projects, which they're great at project managing, onboarding software is kind of a similar story. However, what we've seen being successful is one, you have to have a plan. You have to have leadership part of that plan early on. And they need to be driving that initiative throughout the organization. Very rarely do we see something from bottom up be successful and then leadership kind of abandoned it. You got to stay with it. And then also, having really good implementation, vetting companies that have a really thought out implementation process that are willing to co-pilot with you.
Yeah.
And then also, starting small, pilot it in, one warehouse and one job site. Or you could do multiple depending on, how fast we want to roll things out. And then also having a success criteria, how can we monitor and adapt? What are some of the wins? What are some of the things we need to look for in the gaps so that we can address them early on?
Yeah. So like you talked really early about time to value. So
Mhm.
finding a team you can work with, technology that you want to adopt, and a team you can work with that can get you quickly to that time to value, and then rolling it out incrementally, um,
Mhm.
but always having leadership support, right? Support from the top that this is what we want because this is going to make a big difference.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not to say that doesn't happen a lot of the time, but it just you got to keep holding the torch there. Otherwise people won't use it you know, throughout the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. Well, this is great, Sam. It's great to see you. I'm glad we finally got back to record an episode, and I know we'll have another one coming soon. So that's great. And really appreciate your article and your time today, and can't wait to connect again.
Yeah, same here. Great to see you as always.
All right. Thanks, Sam. We'll see you soon. All
Okay,
right.
bye-bye.
Bye.